Good morning, everyone. This is Carter Patterson, the 2020 chairman of the Forsyth County Chamber Board of Directors. I'd like to welcome you all to our pre-legislative session virtual meeting presented by AT&T and co-hosted with the Lanier Forsyth Rotary Club. Our pre-legislative session virtual meeting offers the community access to our elected officials to answer your questions. Before we get started, I wanted to go over a few items. One, you should have received an email that contains a virtual meeting packet for our meeting today. In this packet, you will find more information about our legislators, the program format, and information about our sponsors. If you wish to submit a question during this time, please use the Q&A feature located at the bottom of the screen. Please do not use the chat feature. You can check the box on the bottom of the Q&A box to submit a question anonymously. Our moderator will ask the questions to our legislators. If for some reason you get disconnected from the meeting, it is being recorded and will be posted, and we will email it out to all participants. Before we get started, I'm going to turn our meeting over to Janice Davis, President of the Lanier Forsyth Rotary Club. Thank you for your participation in this event today, Janice, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Carter. Good morning, everyone. As Carter said, I'm Janice Davis. I'm the current president of Lanier Forsyth Rotary Club. And in normal times when we'd be sharing breakfast together, there'd be about 70 Rotarians in the room with you all. That being said, we're really grateful to be participating today, and thank you so much to the Chamber staff for pulling us all together. While many of us have been constrained about when and how we gather, Rotarians around the world and here in Forsyth County have continued to be active in their communities, from serving meals to first responders and hospital workers, helping isolated seniors, sponsoring COVID testing sites, and building facilities that support education, health, and environment. Rotary's had a long-standing goal of eradicating polio, and this year it was announced that the wild polio virus has been eliminated in all but 2 countries in the world. For the first time, Africa was declared polio-free. What Rotary has learned and shared about distributing the polio vaccine laid the groundwork for responding to the Ebola crisis, and we're hopeful that these learnings will be useful in the distribution of the COVID vaccines as well. Fighting disease is one of Rotary's main causes. The Rotary Foundation recently awarded $20 million to support Rotary clubs worldwide in their immediate response to COVID-19 in their communities and to long-term recovery efforts. Rotary has 35,000 clubs and 1.2 million members worldwide. Here in Forsyth County, there are 5 Rotary clubs with over 300 members combined. And we're all meeting either virtually or a combination of in-person and virtually during these times. My club, Lanier Forsyth, meets on Tuesday mornings at 7:30 a.m., which is why we always are here at this particular meeting. All of our Rotary clubs welcome guests who want to learn more about Rotary, and all of our clubs are also seeking new members who want to contribute and serve in the community. If you don't know a Rotarian, you can always Google us and find a club near you. On behalf of the Lanier Forsyth Rotary Club, I want to especially thank all the members of today's panel for their willingness to serve and their dedication to our community. We really appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you, Janice, and thank you again to Lanier Forsyth Rotary for their partnership on this event. This has been a transformative year for your chamber. Since the founding of the organization in 1953, the Forsyth County Chamber has been a driver of growth, prosperity, and collaboration in our community. While this year has presented us with the unexpected, your chamber has been very intentional in creating a focused plan to create meaningful outcomes that support local businesses and speed along our local economic recovery during this pandemic. Your chamber is very goal-oriented and outcome-focused, and we would like to share with you what we have accomplished in 2020.
In 2020, your chamber presented at the Transportation Research Board, hosted the Chairman's Cabinet Kickoff event, Georgian's first Chamber Roundtable, coordinated surprise visits to Teacher of the Year finalists, hosted the Chamber Economic Outlook Breakfast, the State of the County Luncheon, attended the RSA Conference, hosted the Celebration of Excellence Luncheon, Since then, your chamber has produced 115 webinars, led 16 SBA loan info sessions, consulted 211 businesses on SBA loan applications, hosted 30 virtual networking sessions, held 6 virtual job fairs, engaged over 700 families and 25 restaurants in restaurant bingo, generating over $25,000 in restaurant revenue. Ensured 319 local small businesses received $2 million in Forsyth County CARES funds. Announced 18 economic development projects. Worked on $109 million of new capital investments. Fostered 220 new jobs. Moved into 1 new home. And virtually never missed a beat.
Since the creation of that video, our numbers of jobs created has increased to 528 and 21 economic development projects. In addition to our delegation, we are also joined virtually by many elected officials today. Commissioner Chair Laura Simonson, Commissioner Vice Chair Cindy Jones Mills, Commissioner Dennis Brown, Commissioner Molly Cooper. Thank you for your dedicated service to our community. I want to take some time to thank our sponsors for supporting this opportunity for Chamber members to connect to our delegation members. Thank you to our title sponsor, AT&T, our bronze sponsor, the University of North Georgia, and our patron sponsor, Jan Rooney's State Farm Agency. Thank you for your support of today's events. I will now turn it over to Paul Chambers, the Regional Director of External Affairs for AT&T. Paul has been with the Chamber for more than 15 years, and AT&T is also an engaged corporate citizen in our community. Paul, the room is yours.
Thank you, Carter. You know, everybody says that everything rises and falls with leadership, and I think this year has certainly proven that to be the case. Carter, I can't thank you enough for your leadership, not only of the Chamber, but all that you do in Forsyth County in so many different ways. James has been an incredible leader, transitioning to many different types of programs this year. And Janice, thank you for your leadership of the Rotary Club. As a past Rotary president myself, I know the type of things that you get to deal with every week. Well, as you heard, it said we're going to spend most of our time just answering questions. We've had some pre-submitted questions, and then we have a way for you to ask questions as well. And as was mentioned by Carter at the outset, we're going to ask you to use the Q&A feature of the Zoom meeting software as opposed to the chat feature. So use Q&A, and we will get to those questions after we go through the pre-submitted. I have to also just at the beginning start by saying that this is, as Carter said, been an unbelievable year. We started with a pandemic. We've had the racial strife. We've had a heck of an election season. And as somebody has well said, perhaps on New Year's Day, this coming year, we'll all eat our collard greens, cornbread, and black-eyed peas to bring us good luck in 21. But I know we're excited for the start of a new year, the fact that we have now a vaccine in place, and so many other good things that are going on right now. Let me begin, as we often do, by introducing our legislators. Can't thank them enough for being a part of this. This is a very busy time of year for them as they not only try to get ready personally for the Christmas season, but also for the legislative session that will begin in January. And you will notice as I call each one of their names, we'll have a slide up about some of the committees they serve on. First of all, we begin with Senator Greg Dolezal. Senator Dolezal is the Vice Chairman of the Science and Technology Committee. He is also the Secretary of the Health and Human Services Committee, and the other committees he is a member of are on your screen. We also have Senator Steve Gooch with us. Senator Gooch is the Vice Chairman of the Transportation Committee and the Secretary of the Appropriations Committee. The other committees are on your screen there as well. Third, we have here today Representative Wes Cantrell. Representative Cantrell serves as Chairman of the Small Business Development Committee, and the other committees he serves on are listed. Next is Representative Sherry Gilligan. Representative Gilligan is the Secretary of the Code Revision Committee, and a list of the other committees are up on the screen as well. Representative Todd Jones is with us. Representative Jones is the Vice Chairman of the Science and Technology and Governmental Affairs and Judiciary. A list of the other committees is on the screen as well. And last but not least, we're excited to have new delegation members, Representative-elect Lauren McDonald, who takes a seat previously held by Representative Mark Morris. And I want to stop to say thanks to Mark for his years of service to the state of Georgia and Forsyth County. And then Representative-elect Will Wade, who takes a seat previously held by Kevin Tanner. And once again, can't say enough good things about Kevin Tanner and all he did for transportation and so many other issues for Forsyth County and the state of Georgia. But I thought at this moment, it might be good to allow our two new representatives a moment to briefly introduce themselves. And Representative-elect McDonald, we'll start with you.
Thank you, Paul Chambers. I want to thank AT&T and Forsyth County Chamber of Commerce for hosting this. I've been to many of these in 23 years of living in Forsyth County, and I never knew I'd be sitting on a panel representing District 26 like I am. I want to thank Mark Morris for his service, as you said before, in his 3 years of service to District 26, and also to Representative Kevin Tanner. I want to thank him for his service to our county, but also congratulate Kevin Tanner becoming our new county manager for Forsyth County. I want to think about Cindy Mills right now, Commissioner Cindy Mills, who said last night that she has positive for COVID. I want to keep her in our prayers as she gets through this few weeks of quarantine. Also, I want to take a personal moment to my best friend in the world, Carter Barrett. His daughter has major brain surgery tomorrow, and I want to let those that know Carter and a part of our Rotary Club and long-standing member of the Chamber of Commerce, I want to keep Carter and his daughter Cornelia in our prayers. I look forward to serving in District 26, representing Forsyth County at the next session. It's going to be a tough one. We've been warned in our biennial of everything that's going to be placed in front of us, from of course the budget and all the COVID situation that we've been dealing with, and now with election reform is probably going to be on the front burner for all us that are on this Zoom meeting. And I know it's a big concern of coming up in January of what the elections are going to look like, but I promise you that everybody's working hard to make sure that whatever speculation is out there, that these are fair elections in January. But again, thank you all for letting me participate in this forum.
Thank you, Representative-elect McDonald. And I have to say that after looking at everybody on the screen, you get the award for the best dressed. Senator Dolezal comes in a close second, but you have the tie on, so you win the tiebreaker. There you go. Representative-elect Will Wade, tell us about yourself.
Well, good morning, everybody, and it's great to be here with this fantastic crowd. And I too want to echo Lauren's comments. Thank you to AT&T and UNG and the State Farm agent there in Forsyth County for sponsoring today's event. I've got the arduous task of trying to follow after just a workhorse in the State House and Kevin Tanner, and I just want to echo the same. Congratulations to him, his service to Dawson, Forsyth, and Lumpkin counties over the past 8 years. And I know what he's done for Forsyth County in the State House. and I look forward to what he's going to be doing as serving as your next county manager. Could not have picked a better candidate for sure. You know, I'm a native of Dawson County, got a background in community banking for 22 years and working in Forsyth, Dawson, and Lumpkin County. So this is not just my home, but it's been my career location for over 2 decades. So I'm excited to be able to serve in a different capacity as well, and continuing to juggle hats like my peers on the panel, and look forward to what we've got to face in January. I too know that the election laws are definitely going to be a priority. I also want to make sure that we continue to not lose sight on some of the other important things that we've been able to do over the last 2 years, especially with continued economic growth. I was excited to see the 2.8% unemployment rate for Forsyth County. You know, that to me is just an example of what quality leadership at every level, both public and private, can continue to foster. And I want to see that continue to spread, not just in Forsyth County, but also my district and the rest of the state. I look forward to questions, and I'm excited to be a part of this team, and looking forward to some of our existing representatives to be able to really give you some details as to some of the questions that I've already seen pop up. But I'm going to work hard for this district. It's District 9. I do represent 2 precincts in Forsyth County, but I look forward to being a part of the delegation. And for me, no matter where you live in Forsyth County, I'm going to make sure that we serve you well. So I appreciate the opportunity, and I like Lauren's tie too. We'll have to give him the attaboy for that too.
There you go. Thank you, Representative-elect Will Wade. Thank you for being with us today. And we are going to now move to the pre-submitted questions. And let me remind you, if you have questions, you're participating in this call, to use the Q&A feature and not the chat feature. That's how we'll get questions coming in from the attendees today, the Q&A feature on your screen there. As far as the pre-submitted questions, and once again, we'll try to stay to what we've done in years past, which is I'll read the question and then we'll just ask for 2 answers. So everybody doesn't feel like they have to respond to every question. However, if it's a burning issue and there are 3 or 4 of you that want to answer it, certainly we can do that as well. The goal will be to finish by about 8:50, and then we'll close out and everything done by 9 o'clock. So as far as timetable, we've got a little over an hour right now. So let me get going. First question is this, pre-submitted. What will you do in the upcoming session to ensure voter verification is improved and enforced in all upcoming elections in the state of Georgia? Now we can raise hands, or you can just jump in.
Representative Jones, I don't want to step on you because I know that you're in the Governmental Affairs Committee. Do you want to go first?
Why don't you go ahead, Sherry, and I'm happy to come back around on it. That's fine.
Okay, well, yeah, obviously this has been a burning concern for all of us. We want to make sure that our elections are always free and fair. And there are so many allegations and so many speculations out there that we're not convinced that our most recent one was as free and fair as it should have been. So working with the Secretary of State in some of the things that need to be done, such as tightening up how we vote absentee by mail. So one of the things we need to look at is back in 2005, when Georgia went to no excuse absentee by mail, perhaps that's something that we need to scale back and look into. And do we really want to continue a no excuse, knowing that we have at least 3 weeks of early voting in all of our elections so that people can indeed get to the polls in person. Even during this time of pandemic, we can get to the polls in person. By the way, I want to thank the Forsyth County Elections Board and the director, Mandy Smith, the phenomenal job that y'all have done, the way that you have protected us, the way that you have kept us safe when we go in to vote. Incredible, incredible job. So I cannot thank you enough. I also appreciate that every time I ask a question, even if I don't like the answer, you are always upfront and able to give me a real well-researched and well thought out answer. I appreciate that very much. So thank you, Mandy Smith, and the entire elections officials and the board here in Forsyth County. Going back, So we need to tighten up IDs on absentee by mail. We also need to look at the chain of custody that seems to have fallen by the side. We need to also have a guarantee that we're doing more audits of each election so that people can feel that their vote was accurately counted. And quite honestly, there are a couple of other things that I'm bringing up to the Secretary of State's office that are just ideas right now, and nothing more than just ideas on what we need to do to ensure that we're doing the right thing by our people. But I do think having an ID to vote, if I have to do it in person, it should also be a requirement doing it by mail.
Todd, do you want to jump in or you want me to?
My hunch is this is not going to be the first elections question. Do you want to go ahead and go? And then I'll go ahead the next time there's an elections question. And pick
Sure, I
up.
was actually going to unpack it a little bit, maybe to more broadly, Paul, if it's okay.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking the same way. Why don't you go and then I can pick up if
Yeah, we
necessary.
probably spend an hour unpacking this election.
Exactly, yeah.
So we had 1.3 million absentee ballots cast by mail this year, and we had 2,000 statewide rejected for lack of a signature match. And I think that for any of us, if we look at our ID and then we look at a signature that we may sign on any given day, we would agree that there are more secure ways, certainly in this day and age, that we can secure the vote. And what we've heard repeatedly, and Paul, I can't overstate the amount of constituents who have reached out to each one of us. At one point in time, we looked at our incoming email and we were averaging 1 email a minute incoming to my senate.ga.gov email address. So this is something that all of us are very concerned about. I joined a number of my Senate colleagues about a month ago now and had a press conference and discussed the need for a signature audit. And yesterday, the secretary announced, I would say I wish it was announced sooner, but he announced a signature audit for a random sample in Cobb County. But the reality is we need to expand that beyond Cobb County. I have seen with my own eyes signatures that do not match. Very clearly signatures that do not match where ballots have been sent out in the case where the signature did not match. So we absolutely have to, understand what we're dealing with. We have to understand how many signatures should have been rejected. And that then just goes into a process really of a provisional ballot being sent, and it does not deny the voter the right to vote, but it does require the voter prove who they are. We got very lucky this year in discovering some problems with our elections. We had 4 counties where we had thousands of ballots that turned up either missing or unsubmitted. And that didn't happen because the system was designed to catch it. That happened because we had done some language in the code that passed last year that called for basically a pilot program called a risk limiting audit. It would be a pilot that would then be required to be something that would happen all the time. And the secretary used his authority to take that language of the risk limiting audit and do the hand recount that we saw happen just for the presidential election a couple of weeks after the election. Well, we need to expand that risk limiting audit language, increase the percentage of certainty, and we also need to make sure that that happens in every election, not that it's something that is at the discretion of the secretary moving forward. That was very, very critical in answering a lot of questions that we had, but it also then revealed Floyd, Fayette, some of these other counties that had issues where we literally had thousands of people who were disenfranchised because a memory card was never turned over. And that leads me to the next change that I believe needs to happen, frankly, immediately. It is unconscionable to me that we go day after day after day with a changing number of outstanding ballots during our initial vote counting process. I remember one particular morning, I believe it was the Thursday of election week, we were told at 6:30 in the morning that there were 25,000 more ballots to go. And then we were told at 10:30 that same morning that there was 45,000 ballots to go. I believe that the first thing that we must do at 7 p.m. on election night is count the total number of outstanding ballots, not tabulate them, not scan them, not do anything else, but establish the denominator, if you will, and post that for every county on the secretary's website. Then, as the vote count happens, the numerator goes up, the denominator goes down, and we never have this question of, well, did ballots get pulled in the back door? Did more people vote than should have? Are we missing ballots? The numerator denominator issue would have fixed the problems in Floyd and Fayette because they would have recognized that they had missing ballots. But the big thing that it does is that if you have a scenario where you go to bed at 11 o'clock on election night and you have one candidate that's up 300,000 votes, but you have, say, 600,000 votes still outstanding, you understand where the game is and how much time is left on the clock. And we don't have that currently. That's created a lot of problems. I'm working with the team to actually file a lawsuit to overturn the 2017 ruling that I believe violates the Georgia Constitution and the 17th Amendment of the United States Constitution that requires us to allow voters to register up to 30 days before a runoff election for U.S. Senate elections. The 17th Amendment was the amendment that allowed the direct election of United States senators, and it particularly states that the qualification of those electors shall be the same as the qualifications of those who can vote for the largest chamber of the General Assembly of each state, which for us obviously is the House. Well, Article 2, Section 2 of the Georgia Constitution states that a runoff election is a continuation of the original election. Therefore, in order to vote in a runoff in Georgia, you have to have been eligible to vote in the original election. The National Voting Rights Act of 1993, and this gets a little bit in the weeds, but the motor voter law is what we got sued under in 2017 when Ossoff and Karen Handel were in a runoff. But that ruling was specific to a congressional race, and I don't believe that it applies to the Senate given the 17th Amendment, and I believe that that's actually a violation of the Constitution. So there's a whole smorgasbord really of things that we know that we have to fix, and the way that this election happened a month ago significantly needs to be looked at, needs to be investigated. We have 250 open investigations with the Secretary of State. As you know, Paul, they called in the GBI to assist with those investigations. We had 1,000 people who voted twice in the state of Georgia in the June primary election. So we had 1,000 people commit something that, unless we find out otherwise, was a felony, and we've yet to see one prosecution. We have to aggressively prosecute any illegal voting activity in the state of Georgia so that it serves as a deterrent, up to and including those people who are moving here knowingly to vote in our Senate election in January, knowing that they're going to move back to whichever state they came from. So, Todd, with that, do you want to continue?
Paul, thanks, Greg. Paul, my hunch is there's more elections questions. So do you want to move to the next question, or do you want me to just round that out? It's up to you, because I know we have time limits.
No, I think probably this is the burning question. There's only one other pre-submitted, and
Oh,
it
okay.
just basically says, what are the general things that you will do in the General Assembly this year to try to fix this? So go ahead.
Okay, so I'm not going to repeat everything that Sherry and Greg said, everyone. I think they're spot on. I think just a couple things I want to add just to fill in a little bit of detail. First of all, on the mail-in, expect us not just to do what Alabama's doing in terms of paper ID requirement, but we're going to go ahead and offer an electronic upload requirement. So if you've ever done a mobile deposit on your phone, meaning you just click the front, click the back and move, we're going to do the exact same thing here. So if someone says you're disenfranchising me because you're requiring me to get a paper copy of my ID, we're going to give you an electronic option too. So you have two different options to be able to submit that. So be on the lookout for that within the actual voter bill. The second one, Sherry hit on this, which is the national change of address. Kudos to Derek Somerville, who's a Forsyth resident. He's done a lot of database search, and along with Mark Davis, and we've been able to find a significant issue around moving people from active to inactive based on what are called permanent address change requests, United States Postal Service. So we're going to tighten up the code around what must occur, not at the discretion of the secretary. And then finally, to Greg's point on the provisional ballots, we're requesting for the January 5th, we have requested that provisional ballots be required. And to Greg's point, provisional ballot does not disenfranchise you. We're just saying we need to take an extra step. In the original ballot, we're asking to be required for 3 groups of people. One, what Greg said in terms of the new registrants from November 4th until December 7th. Second, if you put a permanent address change to outside the state of Georgia, that tells us you don't live here anymore. So you need to at least prove why you're voting in the Georgia race. And then third, if your voter registration has a business address or what's called a CMRA, which is basically a UPS store, FedEx store, that's against the code, and we need to find out where you live. We recognize we do not want to disenfranchise those who are homeless. So we recognize that there are going to be times where they may have used a church another house of worship, etc. So we want to be sensitive to that. But we do think by providing the opportunity for a provisional, it gives us the extra step to be able to validate that that individual actually is a resident of Georgia. And we hope that that's going to create a greater amount of confidence inside of the January 5th election. Other than that, I think Sherry and Greg did a really good job hitting each one of the points.
And if I can go
Outstanding.
back, there was one other thing that I wanted to
ahead.
bring up, and that is if you're voting in person, you are required to cast your ballot using the ballot marking device. That's in our law today in Georgia. So if you're voting absentee by mail, you hand mark your ballot. But if you want to do it in person, the only way to hand mark a ballot is to cast a provisional ballot. And I was told specifically that because our machines were up and running at the precinct where I was, had I requested and used a provisional ballot, that the Board of Elections can, at their discretion, reject that provisional because I had the opportunity to vote using the ballot marking device, which, like I say, is in our law that says if you're voting in person, you have to use that device. Knowing now that we have a QR code that people are suspicious of, it would be nice if we could look into that part of the law as well.
Outstanding job by each of you to delve into this issue. Certainly more to come. Let me jump down to a next question, which is what has COVID done to the state's budget and what is the outlook for the 2021 budget?
I'll take that one. I know I'm on appropriations, Steve's on appropriations, I think Greg's on appropriations. I think first and foremost, and I say this tongue in cheek, everyone, I appreciate whether or not you're a closet drinker or an out front drinker. COVID has definitely affected our tax receipts starting in March and April, but the one place where you all have been very consistent is in your intake of alcohol. It's been double-digit growth each month, and it's pretty it's pretty amazing to watch, considering, especially in the beginning when the restaurants were shut down, that meant that the package stores were doing that much more business. But in all seriousness, putting that aside, as we all know, we cut the budget by about 10% for the fiscal year with the expectation that the receipts were going to suffer due to COVID. Knock on wood, that's actually been just the opposite. We have seen actually receipts up. We've seen relatively strong growth. As Carter Patterson announced yesterday, even in Forsyth County, we're at 2.8% unemployment, and SPLOST is up here locally. Statewide, we're seeing also an increase, especially in personal income tax and corporate income tax. As you can probably imagine, lodging is down and anything around restaurants is down, which right now, of course, we want to do everything we can to pick that back up. So at this point, we are seeing what could be this fiscal year could ultimately be the highest tax receipts in the history of the state during a pandemic. I don't necessarily want to draw a complete conclusion, but I do want to say that I think that does at least bode well in terms of the approach that we have taken. And I think the other thing that we need to keep in mind is we have been fortunate that when the federal stimulus package ended July 31st with the extra $300 a month, we expected that to cause an impact to our receipts because, as many of you may know or may not know, that is taxable income. But ultimately, coming into August and September, when the $300 was out of people's paychecks, we still saw growth. So ultimately, if you're looking at that as a barometer, I think it's fair to say that we're seeing an upward tilt, but I still remain cautiously optimistic. And I'm glad to see the governor has asked that the departments submit budgets at a zero line as opposed to a decrease or an increase. But I still think that all of us need to be reticent in terms of what we're going to do, especially as we head into 21.
I'll piggyback on that, Paul, if that's okay. I think it's always helpful when we talk about the budget to just give people kind of an idea of some top line numbers, because we talk about this budget and somebody mentioned, how does it impact the fiscal year 2021 budget? We already passed that. So the budget that we passed was the fiscal year 2021 budget. We'll do a supplemental budget based on revenue estimates when we get back into session. And then we will ultimately be looking at the fiscal year 2022 budget. But we allocated spending, appropriated spending for 26 billion taxpayer dollars here in the state of Georgia. And over 1/3 of that goes to the Department of Education, 9.6 billion. 3.7 billion, which is 14.5%, goes to the Department of Community Health. We've got about 2.1 million Georgians who are on Medicaid. We've got about 140,000 Georgians who are on Peach Care. We've got about 60,000 who are on the state health benefit, sorry, 600,000 on the state health benefit plan, which would largely be teachers and other government employees. Board of Regents is 2.3 billion, which comes in at 8.9%. And then Department of Transportation, which is near and dear to most of our hearts in Forsyth County, is 1.7 billion. And there's some federal funds that come alongside that as well. What I think is interesting when we talk about a 10% cut, and when you talk about an approximately $3 billion cut, we've got 50 state agencies. So the state agencies, the 4 or 5 that I just mentioned, are 4 or 5 out of 50. The bottom 38 total appropriations is $1.9 billion. So in other words, when we were looking at $3 billion of cuts, some people say, well, why did you touch this? Or why did you touch that? Or why did you touch that? Well, the top 12 agencies account for 24 billion of the 26 billion. The bottom 38 account for 2 billion. So we could literally have eliminated, and maybe you should look at eliminated some agencies, but we could literally have eliminated 38 of the 50 state agencies and not had enough money to go through the cuts that we went through last year. So I know for me, as somebody who didn't have a significant understanding of the state budget as a citizen, hearing those top line numbers kind of helps put things in perspective. And a lot of the large budget allocations are formulaic. So there are things that we input the number and it outputs what it's going to cost you. So our ability to move the numbers around, it was really a Herculean effort to get a balanced budget. And I'm proud to live in a state that requires a balanced budget. And the state of Georgia has done a great job over the last few years, putting money away into what we call the rainy day fund, but the reserve fund allowed us to help bridge that gap.
Let's move to transportation. I've got a couple of questions I'm going to kind of roll into one. First of all, how has the COVID recession impacted the long-range transportation projects Georgia DOT has on the books for the next decade? And then a follow-up to that, is there an opportunity to increase funding to Georgia Transportation Infrastructure Bank? So transportation, always a big issue in Forsyth County. What are the impacts because of COVID? And also an opportunity to increase funding to the Georgia Transportation Infrastructure Bank. I think Senator Gooch has raised his hand. Go ahead.
Hey, good morning. I was going to jump off in just a few minutes. I have another meeting up here in Lumpkin County, but I wanted to answer that question if I could. I chair the Appropriations Subcommittee on Transportation Funding, and we did cut, I think it was a couple $100 million last year during the COVID crisis in transportation. I do believe that a lot of that money will be restored this coming year. We have seen a slowdown in traffic. It's picked back up, probably back to about 95% of what we would consider normal. But I think going forward, we're just going to have to wait and see what the congestion does. Obviously, gas prices have remained stable, which is a good thing for consumers. But our gas tax is now a excise tax set at 26 cents per gallon based on House Bill 170 we passed back in 2015. So that sort of saved us on that. And going forward, I think we're going to see some of those projects that were cut this year get put back in line. I think we basically just kicked the can down the road about a year. So we delayed the implementation of some of those major projects. But I do believe you'll see most, if not all of those projects come back in the 2021 calendar year. If not 21, then definitely by 22. So we basically just shut the thing down for 6 months or a year of implementation. But there's a lot of projects that are on the books, what we call the STIP and the TIP, the Transportation Improvement Plan around the state, and it's in the billions of dollars. The biggest projects that we're working on is obviously around the Atlanta area, 285, Georgia 400, and those express lanes. Those are still on task to be completed on time, and I think you'll see that project continue to move forward. It's not going to be impacted at all by the revenue. Some of the GTIP money that you asked about is simply an appropriation by the House and the Senate. So GTIP is the Georgia Transportation Investment Bank. We have loans and grants in that funding bucket, and that's money that comes out of motor fuel tax. It's dedicated to roads and bridges. a lot of your local governments use the GTIB funds to do sidewalk projects and do special projects around maybe a downtown area or an intersection. So a lot of times a city or a county may apply for some of that GTIB funding. Anytime they bring some of their own local match to the table, it gets a higher score on a competitive basis than just a county or a city that wants a grant per se. So I would say to whoever asked the question, if you're interested in a GTIB project, make sure your city or county comes to the table with a good proposal. Also put a little skin in the game. If you have a 25 to 50% match, that usually helps you get to the top of the list. But we will continue to look to raise those GTIB funds in the budget every year. But obviously right now with the reduction in revenue, we probably had to scale that back, and hopefully we can get that money put back in the next 12 to 24 months.
Hey, Paul, can I piggyback off Senator Gooch's comments? And thank you, Senator Gooch, for doing this morning. I know you got to run to your next,
Go ahead.
Your next meeting. We have been able to, and really it's been a team effort. We have a great relationship with our county commissioners. They consistently communicate with us when we're in and out of session. But Representative Tanner, those have gone before us as well, Senator Gooch, and the current delegation, we've managed to secure really an unprecedented level of funding for transportation in Forsyth County as it relates to roads that we all drive in every day. And I'd like to talk about that for just a minute, Paul, if it would be okay, because I think it's something.
Sure.
So current projects that are underway are things that we see happening, like the 369 resurfacing project, which is scheduled to be done by the end of the year. We see the 369 bridge. Bridge is really in two places that have been widened and improved. We're about to start the Georgia 400 369 interchange project, which is a 3-year project that really was part of the transportation bond negotiation that happened long before I was in office. We're about to see a significant, a $1.6 billion project, and that's going to be express lanes on Georgia 400 that will run from the perimeter all the way up to McFarland Parkway. And that's really a large federal project that the state is participating in. Where we have Q4 2022, we're supposed to start the Highway 20 widening from 369 and Cherokee all the way over to Post Road. It's $152 billion. Then from Post Road to North Corners will be simultaneous. That is another $150 million. That's the $300 million project there. Significant win for Forsyth County. In the South Forsyth County, I should say, in addition to the Ronald Reagan extension, which is underway with county funding, is the McGinnis Ferry widening and the McGinnis Ferry interchange. So if you begin to think about what we're doing here, if you think about what I just described with Highway 20 and 369, if you begin to think about Ronald Reagan and then McGinnis Ferry, and then ultimately the Highway 9 widening, which will start next year. The Highway 9 widening is about a $160 million project. What you're seeing that we're doing is we're building options for us to be able to get north and south and east and west, right? So instead of just having Georgia 400 and something happens on Georgia 400 and you're sitting on Georgia 400 for 30 minutes, you'll now be able to get off the McGinnis Ferry interchange and go south of McGinnis Ferry if you need to, or you'll be able to get off and go to Ronald Reagan and head north. You'll have a lot of options there. The Post Road widening, which is something that is very near and dear to my heart, something I started working on as a private citizen, something that we're in active conversation with both the planning director and the commissioner of GDOT about how to accelerate that project. We're making great headway there. The lieutenant governor has been a good partner in working on that project. And then in addition to that, we've got all these other little projects that we've managed to procure funding for. So State Road 9 and Bannister, just as one example, we'll be getting a roundabout. State Road and AC Smith will be getting a roundabout. So we're really looking at these major thoroughfares, and we're also looking at significant points, significant intersections that need to be improved, and we're procuring funding for that. And that's just an ongoing project for us. It's not like we're saying, hey, we got this $700 million in funding that's never been done before and we're done. We believe that that really just scratches the surface. And I don't know that our delegation and our commissioners communicate more about anything else than we communicate about transportation. So we're finally starting to make some headway there. I think we're just catching up. And then once we get caught up, obviously we need to lay the groundwork for the infrastructure moving forward that we'll need for the next 20 years in Forsyth County.
Paul, can I add just one thing about the future? Because I know one part was the future. I think it's imperative, and I know some of you are going to smile because you've heard me say it probably every time we've been together, but it is absolutely an imperative for all of us to understand how fast autonomous vehicles and how fast alternate transportation, other than just quote us getting behind the wheel or there being an 18-wheeler on our roads, is going to occur. I think by 2030, we will have scale of autonomous vehicles. I think by the end of 21, you'll start seeing commercial vehicles autonomous. Sometime around 23 or 24, you'll start seeing more, I'll say, individual or consumer vehicles autonomous. And then please don't be surprised that as air taxis start to mature, we will hopefully have the first liftoff in Georgia by 2022. But by the end of this decade, we will see air taxis carrying anywhere from 50 to 60 people. So as you start to have this intersection between, I'll say, traditional, in terms of all the projects that Senator Dolezal just said, everything that Senator Gooch just said, we also have to be thinking about where should we be placing our bets, because that one change around the autonomous will allow throughput on existing roads, some estimate as much as 300% higher. So what do we do then? And then the last thing I'll have you think about is this: coming out of the port today, coming out of the airport today, cargo is huge. We know that because we're constantly being asked, will you put more railheads in? Will you put, will you provide for more road widening in terms of Interstate 16? But the question we have to be asking ourselves is, what will additive manufacturing, also known as 3D printing, what will that do to imports from Asia? What will that do from imports in the terms of what we'd see from South America and from Europe? Because we suspect, again, by the end of this decade, but that many of you will be, quote, printing on demand your watch, your phone, your shoes, your belt, etc. And what will that do to imports? Hence, will that decrease the amount of, I'll say, road traffic? So again, I throw that out there, everyone, not for any other reason, but think about that. And then the last question I ask on behalf of the delegation would be this: as we see road miles, gas miles go down because EV going up, the excise tax that Senator Gooch talked about, we start seeing a decrease in our DOT funding. So we're right now looking at what are alternative ways to fund roads, because our expectation is the fuel tax will be bringing in as much as 25 to 30% less by the end of this decade. How do we go ahead and account for that in a very efficient manner? So if any of you have creative ideas, by all means, please let us know. Thanks.
Let me call attention to a comment made by Carter Patterson, which said that air taxis need an airport. So we all know what he means by that, and always a burning issue. Yeah, there you go, up and down. The other thing I want to remind people is that we encourage you to use the Q&A feature as opposed to the chat feature. So we're monitoring the Q&A feature of the Zoom software. So get your questions in via that this morning if you have them. Next question for a couple of people is, during the General Assembly, the public has lots of access and interaction with elected officials. With social distancing and other COVID protocols, what do you expect this coming session will be like, and how will it be different?
I'll speak on that. I know there's been a committee that has been established between the House and the Senate and Georgia Building Authority that they're currently meeting to try to come up with some guidelines so that the people will have access to the people's house. We're all frustrated right now just to talk about the election process and how we, as a lot of that's a legislator to be or the current legislators that wanted to get back down there to the people's house and have a special session. Unfortunately, we didn't have the votes in the House and the Senate to pull that off without the blessing of the governor. So it was kind of left in the governor's hands. But access to the Georgia State Capitol is important to each of us. And we want to make sure that our citizens for Forsyth County and citizens throughout the state of Georgia will have access not only to the Capitol to voice their opinions, yay or nay on legislation, but have access to the legislature so that they can voice their concerns and make Georgia a better state.
Anyone else? All right, other than
I'll say this, Paul.
Go ahead, Will. Mm-hmm.
One thing I'll say, though, is I think that you'll just see all of us individually and even collectively in delegations do things like this more and more often to allow more direct communication with folks. And I've already had a couple of students at the University of North Georgia that have reached out, and they want to try to kind of coordinate with, for example, in our local area, we've got a couple of seniors group. I know Steve Gooch is very familiar with them, and then basically let these younger college kids take technology to them to help them integrate and, set up Zooms just like this for specific, whether it's a one policy issue that they want to discuss, or if it's something that's going on with updates. I can tell you, it seems as though I don't know any other stage of communication since the November 3rd election. I have had, I can't even quantify the number of connections, and I'm not even in office yet. I've not been sworn in yet. I know all of the delegation is feeling the same level of communication. So I think it's a matter of balancing that and looking for ways to bring those things together. And I look forward to utilization of technology to try to meet that end, so that whether they can't physically be down there or take their air cab and land close to the Capitol, as Todd predicts will happen in the future, I think doing it like this is going to be where we're going to continue to see a lot more communication demand. And I look forward to that. So just a thought. So.
A very good thought as well. And technology certainly is how we have been able to do things like this right here, and that's to communicate and connect with each other. There is another pre-submitted question that just has to do with other issues. We'll get to that at the end. Let me just go ahead and start with some of those that have just come in this morning. The first one says, we need skilled craft workers desperately. What are your plans? I'm assuming that means plans to help grow the number of skilled craft workers in our state.
I'll take first shot, everyone. I think without a doubt, studies show that as long as a child goes somewhere after high school, they have a higher propensity to at least get into the middle class, be able to live what could best be described as a fruitful, productive life. To me, those three options are military, the technical school, and higher ed. One of the things that I'm asking the technical schools to do is in the upper arc, so that would be basically Cobb, South Cherokee, Forsyth, etc., is to really stop talking job placement, which right now they're anywhere between 98% and 100%, and talking about entrepreneurship. Right now, there's a little bit of a stigma in the upper arc around your son or your daughter going to technical school, and it shouldn't be that way. There's a lot of great things coming out of technical school, and frankly, the state pays for most, if not all, of those fees. But we need to be able to convince mom and dad that pressuring down on their kids to go to higher ed, may that be UGA, Georgia Tech, UNG, etc., isn't necessarily the right thing for that child, but rather if they are interested in using their hands, if they're interested in getting outside, if they're interested in doing something like that, it's a great path. And frankly, we're hoping that once we get the data, we'll be able to demonstrate, because I do think the hypothesis is there's greater entrepreneurial rate coming out of the technical schools than there is out of higher ed. We hope that just that tweak in terms of how we market that will hopefully open up a little bit more of a pipeline to get more kids through that, so that we can have the trades in terms of maybe HVAC, welding, etc.
Representative Cantrell.
Yeah, Paul, one of the things we're looking at in the Small Business Development Committee is there's so many foreign-born Georgians who are here legally, who have all kind of hurdles in front of them as far as getting that training that they need. So had a study committee last year that COVID kind of interrupted. We didn't approve any study committees, but looking real hard at any of the regulations and hurdles that we have in our state that are inhibiting people from developing those skills that the questioner asked about, those craft skills, those the things that a lot of people don't really consider as options for one reason or another. There are plenty of people out there. We just had to make sure that we give them an easy way in to get that training and develop those skills so they can have a meaningful job and become a very productive member of our economy here in the state of Georgia. So that's one of the things we're looking at.
Paul,
Yes, sir.
I want to thank our own Chamber of Commerce. They of course really put a lot of effort into entrepreneurship in Forsyth County. We're very fortunate to have Lanier Tech. Our technical education program is top in the nation. I mean, there's opportunity out there for each and every kid to get a technical education. And just like Todd said, the pressures are there. I mean, I put the pressures on my kids at home to be the best that they can be. And, you look at the higher ed, for just because we did it, we think that's what's right for our kid. And our kids will tell us what's right for them in their actions. And I want to, look at what the opportunities that the businesses in Forsyth County really need to get involved and make sure that we're working with our local school system to let kids know there's a place for them in our technical program. And their jobs out there. I mean, it's the entrepreneurs will do well. These kids have a lot of vinegar in them, and they're gonna find their place and create their own journey with these jobs. But I want to look at our technical program and invest more in it. I think that's where the future for our young people are.
Once again, yeah, go ahead, Representative-elect Wade.
I think there's one point I just want to follow up with that discussion, and that is over the last 15 years as a local Board of Education member, I've seen this area specifically, a couple other pockets in the state, but I want to see it continue to enhance where we see more blending between that of the career technical ed at the high school and direct partnerships. I can tell you in Dawson County, the school system there and its direct partnership with Lanier Tech has been phenomenal. Obviously, dual enrollment has been a key component of that, but I still think that there is a way to continue to blend even some of the private sector into that. We have 2 local employers that have been basically giving 1 or 2 year old equipment, donating it, and it's being used by both high school students and those technical college students, all based on their ability to go through that program. And I think that we just need to continue to look at ways to enhance that across the state, especially in areas where those students do have an entrepreneurial desire, can meet the technological advances I know Todd talked about, but also looking at making sure that we utilize those dollars and utilize the physical assets that we have. There's no reason to build another technical college campus if you've got a high school campus at night that could incorporate that space. So I think just looking for partnerships like that, I think can continue to help meet that demand and also take away some of that old stigma. But honestly, I don't really think that the stigma is quite as bad amongst the folks that are in my generation and below, just because to them, it's just an option. I mean, everything is a la carte in our life now, and students have already embraced that, and families are starting to embrace that. So I think we just need to realize they're already there. We just got to build the infrastructure around meeting that demand. So appreciate the opportunity to speak on that.
Next question is, the current structure of the alcohol distribution system in Georgia is non-competitive. In fact, it is a monopoly, says the questionnaire. This is especially true now with all the craft breweries. The recent changes to the law that have allowed these craft breweries to distill alcohol further severs the tight control distributors once held over liquor package stores and bar restaurants. What can be done to open this up to the free market?
Let me, oh shoot. The 3-tier system that's in the state of Georgia, it's been a tough system to break. I mean, I want to use Chateau Elan, for instance. They're one of the first to ever be able to sell on premises without having to take a bottle of wine, send it to a distributor, then the distributor take it to the beer wine store and then sell to the consumer. That's a very powerful group that has kept the 3-tier system there for the state. But as our craft brewery business has grown in Georgia, we really need to look at changing that and give opportunity to these entrepreneurs that we're just talking about to be able to sell directly to the public.
As a non-drinker, I agree. The 3-tier system is ridiculous, and there have been many efforts in the 6 years I've been in the House. There have been efforts every year I've been down there to address the unfair monopoly that it creates. But as Rep-elect McDonald said that lobby is very powerful. Not with me, because they got no influence over me, but they have a lot of influence with a lot of people that are in key positions. And so that relic, that three-tier system, the relic of the past, is we still having to deal with it in the present. But hopefully we'll chip away again at it a little bit more this next session and open that up to be more of a free market environment.
Paul, I'm gonna, if I may, give an outside the box answer to that question.
Sure.
And this really applies to a lot of the things when you look at government and say, why is that the way that it is? And we could talk about 50 different topics in which we describe the quote powerful lobby that has a control on that. The ultimate solution to that in my mind is term limits. And that may be the only solution to that, because the reality is each one of us that are on this panel today are on a 2-year, or we're elected for 2 years. And so what that means is that we just got elected this, a month ago. But a year from now, all of us are only going to be 5 months away from a primary. And I can only go to my brother and my dad and my neighbors every, so often and try to get money to run, a $250,000 election. What I've seen happen in my first term is the people that are outgoing senators, the people that are not returning to the chamber, they're liberated. It's like they have this renewed sense of freedom because they're not worried about who they have to please and who they have to raise money from and what committee they might lose and all this kind of thing. So I'm actually introducing legislation that I know is not going to pass this year, but that I want to begin the conversation around term limits. And I think that it's a fundamental shift that if we could see that in our government, I don't think that it can be overstated how significant that shift will be as it relates to all of these things that all of us look at and say, why is that broken in government? Why is that broken? Well, it's broken because somebody has invested a lot of money. In fact, my first year, we were voting on some tax carve out. Our tax code in Georgia is like Swiss cheese. And we were voting on some other tax carve out for some other special interest group. And I was actually talking to Senator Gooch, and I was walking back across the chamber to get to my desk. And I heard one of my colleagues say to the other colleague, why are we voting on this tax increase? And she didn't even, or this tax credit, she didn't even know what it was. And her colleague responded to her very honestly and said, because they've got a good lobbyist. And the way that you deleverage power from the lobbyists is by removing the incentive of the elected officials from working too closely with them. And that the only way that I can think of to do that is term limits.
If I could piggyback on that,
Sure.
I really, Senator Dolezal's on exactly on the right track here. And I think we need to put our heads together, Greg, because I've already had a bill drawn up that would provide term limits for legislators, term limits for the lieutenant governor. It would also expand the senators might be interested to know, expand the term of a senator to 4 years from 2. And
I
that's
have
what my bill would.
already done too.
So we need to connect on that. Maybe have companion bills. I've already been told my bill will go straight to rules. So I'm going to celebrate that it got to completely bypass the committee process.
Let's talk about why the 4-year piece and why that's important.
Well, I just think we're running for office constantly, and I think if you have 4 years, well, number one, a senator, I hate to give credit to the Senate, but they represent over 3 times as many people as we do in the House. They ought to have a little more time. It feels like we run for office constantly. And so I just feel like a differentiation between the 2 chambers in that regard, because they do represent a little over 3 times the amount of people that I do, makes sense. And it would free them up a little bit more. This is my last term. I self-term limited to 4 terms. And so I'm already experiencing the freedom in a greater sense, knowing that this is my last term. It's more of a relief. I felt free the whole time I've been here, but because I'm not, I'm kind of a fish out of water, if you will, as far as politicians go. But I think it would be a huge advantage for the Senate to have a 4-year term. Greg, you might be able to add a little more to that.
Well, I do think it would. It's for the reason you stated. If you look at the structure of the federal government, we've got 2-year terms for the members of the House of Representatives. We have 6-year terms for for U.S. senators. I know the minute that I drop the bill, the headline's not going to be that I drop a term limit bill to limit all politicians' time in office. The headline's going to be that I'm trying to extend my own term. But the reality is I have a self-imposed term limit as well, so I would not be the benefactor of that unless it should pass this year, I suppose, which is not going to happen. But we have to have a serious look at, and I actually dropped the bill, Wes, it's funny you mentioned that, because I dropped the bill last term as well, the term limit of the lieutenant governor at the lieutenant governor's request. Right. So I think the irony of what I've seen is when you have people that are the people that I'd like to see in office, high functioning, they have something to offer society. They're still plugged in back home, almost to a T. The people that fit that profile, the people that don't need to be down there, if you will, the people that fit that profile have all told me that they think that we should have term limits. So I think that we're onto something. We just have to convince.
And speaking of that, maybe a little less popular topic, I'm also have drawn up a bill to raise legislator pay because I think you get what you pay for. I think I'm in a little bit of a unique position to carry that legislation because it won't benefit me personally because it wouldn't go into effect until I'm gone. But I think the legislature is seriously underpaid, $17,000 a year. I think that needs to be up. I'm going to take the recommendation of the State Compensation Commission recommendation. They're supposed to give me one this week, whatever they come up with. And it's not a huge number, but around the $30,000 range, because I think people need to be compensated for the work. It's still, it's a job that's probably should pay more than that, but we need to up the pay so that we can up the types of individuals who would consider running for office. And so that's another thing. And I think it goes hand in hand with the term limits to get us a Georgia General Assembly that will really, really work hard to represent the people that their constituents instead of the lobbyists that have so much influence down there.
Wes, do me a favor. Can you add on to that bill a budget for policy research? I know we've discussed this before. It'd be awesome to be able to have at least a shared staff to help us research policy, because that would give us better leverage to be able to do our job. So sorry, Wes.
Yeah, and I'd like to look into term limiting our leadership positions for chairmanship and to be the Speaker of the House. I think that would also help in changing the culture that we have in both chambers.
And I agree, Sherry. That almost needs to be a separate bill, because if you pass term limits for legislatures, then the term limits for leadership takes care of itself. So if you couldn't get term limits for legislators, but you could get term limits strictly for leadership, that would make sense. But I'd rather go for the term limits overall, because I think the benefits are far exceed just term limiting the leadership.
We have about 15 minutes left in our time today, and let's do this. I've got 3 other pre-submitted questions that I'm just going to read. And then instead of answering each one, how about we do it this way? How about we let everybody have a minute or two here at the end to just, if you want to address these questions real quickly, you can, or if you would prefer to speak to the 1 or 2 issues that we've not discussed that you want to see get addressed in the session upcoming. And I know this is going to be tight, but we're just trying to stay on schedule here. But here would be the questions. I'm just throwing out the remaining ones I've received. What will you do in the 2021 legislative session that will specifically benefit Forsyth County? Number 2, given the alarming spike in drug and alcohol use in 2020, will you commit to maintaining the modest funding for Georgia's addiction recovery support centers? These are efficient, low-cost services with proven successes. Another question, as an employer who employs workers in the $10 to $15 range, it has become increasingly harder to compete for this talent in Forsyth County. What ideas or solutions do you have to offer? Are there options for the public schools to partner more with the entrepreneurs who really need the help in a work-study arrangement that is not bound by a mandatory federal minimum wage? And The last one on the subject of alcohol, why can we not have the same hours each day? Sunday should not be any different. Could the state not change this across the state? So a lot out there, and I'm not asking everybody to address each one, but I just wanted to let you know what some of the people that are on the call today are thinking. But with that said, we've got about 10 or 11 minutes. Why don't we just go around and each one mention the one or two things that may not have been discussed that you want to see get addressed this year. And why don't we start Representative-elect McDonald? I think you're still on mute.
Paul, yeah. I'm trying to find all these buttons on the computer and listening to kids getting ready, and a lot of distractions in a house right now with 3 kids home from school and doing some virtual online. So I apologize. You can see them moving around in the background. I'll look at the Sunday sales question. I'll pick that one. I think that's a lot of that's left up to, correct me if I'm wrong, the delegation. I think that's left up to your local government. I don't think we as legislators need to be micromanaging each county and telling them what they're going to do, whether it's alcohol sales or any other policy that directly affects a county. So I don't know, and please correct me, Todd Jones, Greg, that's a local issue to determine your times of when alcohol sales are in place. Is that correct?
We don't allow, even with local legislation, we don't permit it 24/7 by 365. We do have some limitations on Sunday morning.
Okay. I was trying to take it easy one, guys. I was trying to get mine out of the way since Paul, you picked me first. Why not Will Wade or somebody first? Keep getting me.
Representative-elect Wade.
All right. Well, since Lauren already touched the Sunday sales, and honestly, I agree with letting each community make that decision and let their voters make those choices. I'm not personally I'm a lot more like Wes, so I'll go ahead and let Lauren know that any event that we have, Lauren, whatever is offered to me, I'm going to let you partake and tell me how well that Georgia grown winery did. Okay. But I'm all about helping them reach their goal. But I want to touch on an idea that I've got. Don't know that it's something that we can pull off within year one, but I want to try to do it. And I think it will help towards some of the goals of funding. For example, the question about recovery support centers. In our community, I've seen over the last year, a lot of the philanthropic groups, I mean, very legitimate 501c3s, nonprofits have been hammered. I mean, just their needs have grown and their funding sources and their options for funding sources were eradicated with the pandemic. And I would like to have a deep discussion about a 2-year, 2-for-1 state tax credit for any individual that wants to donate or make a contribution. So if your passion is for that venue, then if you donate, and obviously we need to have some caps and some limits, but if you want to donate $500 to that Georgia Recovery Program, that you get $1,000 credit just for that 2-year period of time. Because I'm telling you, I've sat on these committee boards, I've seen their funding cut 70 and 80% from their, fundraising opportunities. I do think that as the vaccine and the pandemic continue to go away, hopefully over the next year to 2, that we'll see a lot of those communities thriving again and having those events, but the needs have not gone away. I know, Wes, I'm sure your church, you've probably seen a great demand. All of you probably have your own faith-based community programs that you're involved in, but there's a lot of those folks that collectively need, I think, a jolt of revenue. And I think for me, tax credits is a great way to do that and let the market kind of decide if you want to support a children's program, a recovery program, a drug court program, whatever that is. I think there's a really good reason to have that conversation. And I don't think it would be a huge hit to the budget given the numbers that we've seen as far as sales tax dollars coming in. I just think it would be a really good time to have that conversation and help out not just that one program that was mentioned, but hundreds of those across this state. So hopefully we can have a a dialogue about that. And that's something that I want to try to take on come January.
Representative Cantrell, an issue or two you'd like to see get done that we haven't talked about.
Let's see. I got three things that I'm drawing up legislation for. One is a school choice bill, similar to what Senator Dolezal carried a couple years ago, but with an additional caveat, especially making families who live in a school district that did not offer 100% in-person instruction eligible to have a choice. But we've put a lot of our school districts, not Forsyth and not Cherokee where I live, but some of our school districts have put families in an incredibly difficult position by not offering in-person instruction. So I think those families particularly need to have some options. But looking at that school choice bill, I'm going to continue to fight to end time change in Georgia. I know a lot of people laugh about that issue, but my constituents don't think it's a laughing matter at all. I think it's very important. So I'm going to introduce that legislation again to get rid of time change. And then a third, and one that can get in the weeds real quick, is I'm looking at ranked choice voting, which is an instant runoff for two specific applications. Number one would be for military and overseas ballots. If we had ranked choice voting for those ballots, we could get back to a 4-week runoff instead of the 8-week runoff and ruining our Christmas vacation like this one is. We would have already had the runoff at this point in time and been done with it. Secondly, I'd like to see us have ranked choice voting in the presidential election only, because there is no opportunity for a runoff in that particular race. I just personally, I have a problem with someone winning our state that did not win 50% plus one of the vote. I think that's a very dangerous position to be in, and ranked choice voting would solve that. It's a little more complicated than I'm making it, but that's an issue that I'm introducing legislation because I want to start that conversation. I'd really like to see us get back to the 4-week runoff, and I'd like to see us send our presidential electors to the candidate who would actually get over 50% of the vote.
Thank you. Representative Gilligan, one or two issues you'd like to tackle or see get addressed that we haven't talked about today?
Well, thank you, Paul, and thank you everybody who participated. I don't know if we'll get closing comments, so I just want to thank everybody who took time out of their busy schedule to participate today. And there are a couple of things. When you mentioned the spike in use of alcohol and drugs, we know that there is a mental health issue here in the state of Georgia, of course, nationwide, and it's been heightened and brought to the fore because of the pandemic and our reactions to it. We have been closed off and removed from each other, and we are by nature designed in a way to be around other people, to be with people, and staring at a screen is not our normal go-to nature. So we're seeing a lot of issues, and I happen to believe that government is not the answer to these ills. I do participate in my faith community, and a lot of us do, and even people who are not people of faith have passions that drive them to help others. So we need to find ways to encourage the charitable giving. One of the things that we can do is make sure that people have more money in their pocket. And one of the ways to get more money in your pocket is to continue to look at reduction in taxes. I believe that more government, like I say, is not necessarily the answer. More regulation is certainly not the answer. So if we can reduce regulations, it will help businesses thrive. So that was one of the questions on the $10 to $15 to hire talent. If you had fewer regulations, fewer government burdens on, be able to perhaps even look at being able to raise incomes for, salaries for your employees. That's something that we can do if you had more money in your pocket that you could then dole out to your employees. But your employees, even at $10 or $15, would have more money in their pocket. When you have more money in your pocket, you feel like you can be more charitable. because you have the ability to make that change. And by the way, when it talks the question about benefiting Forsyth County, all of these things that I'm talking about benefit not only Forsyth County, but the entire state. We have a wonderful community, very generous community. And it was very obvious by the reaction early in this, early in the year when we had so many efforts and people were buying restaurant gift cards to give to others. That helped the restaurateur and it helped others to be able to go and get meals. We saw in working with the chamber how we can come together. So our chamber, our charities, our community, we're thriving because we care about each other. It's a wonderful community. So anyway, these ideas of lowering the income tax, lowering these regulations, that helps Forsyth County. And I'll be working with those on appropriations, which I see some faces. Oh, of course, Senator Gooch is no longer with us, but no longer on on the call. I shouldn't say no longer with us. That didn't sound right, but he's no longer on the call. But I would love to see that we are able to get the funding for the University of North Georgia campus here in Cumming. That will be huge for us to be able to expand the campus here and have more of students able to attend here at our Cumming campus. So that's something I'd like to, again, working with my colleagues in the delegation, working with my colleagues on the appropriations committees to see what we can do to do that. We were excited that we got the funding last year for the libraries, but let's see what we can do working together to help the University of North Georgia. I think I answered all of that. Again, I just want to say thank you to everyone who hopped on this. Really appreciate all of you sacrificing your time and giving us the ability to reach out to you.
Senator Dolezal, one or two other issues perhaps that have not been brought up today you'd like to see addressed.
Thank you, Paul. First thing on my list was to highlight the $2 million that was secured for the Fowler Road Library and to talk about the UNG campus as a local issue. So that was the answer to that question. You know, UNG is key for our dual enrollment students as well. I've got a number of friends who have students attending both West Forsyth or Central Forsyth and also going to UNG, and that campus is maxed out on capacity. And as the dual enrollment program continues to grow, that's going to be more and more important. We're going to continue to have a relentless pursuit of transportation funding. Really, next up is Post Road and some of the other major state arterials through the county. Economic development is going to continue to remain important. You know, we mentioned Forsyth County having less than a 3% unemployment rate. The economic development engine that is Georgia and has been Georgia for the last decade that benefits Forsyth County perhaps as much as any other county in the state. The county commissioners have asked us to move them from the to the ARC, to the Atlanta Regional Commission. So we're going to be working with them on achieving that as well. And then lastly, I'm going to be looking at, we did this during COVID, but we're going to revisit it with the task force to look at the 400 tax exemptions and tax credits that have carved our tax base up to the tune of $4 billion. And the goal to do that is not just to put $4 billion more dollars into the budget, but we only bring in about $9 billion from the income tax. And so for me, we could cut the income tax approximately in half if we were to merely shore up really the efficacy of our tax code and get rid of these special interest tax cuts, some of which are 30 years old. So that's something I'm going to be working with Mike Dudgeon on, which is named a blast from the past. But Mike and I have been working closely on that in the Lieutenant Governor's office. And thanks everybody for joining us. Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays to you, Paul, and it's a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you, Senator. Representative Jones.
Hey, good morning. Thanks
Comments?
a lot. Sure. Just quick two. First and foremost, keep in mind the Department of Corrections is the largest provider of mental health services in the entire state. And by the way, that can be said about all other 49 states. So I want to go ahead and put that in combination with the question around drug and alcohol. And what we need to be able to do is have targeted efforts around the state. And that means not just short-term, but also long-term and assisted living. That is going to take a Herculean effort from a funding standpoint and a resource standpoint. I think that's something that we need to be focused on. Second, from a Forsyth point of view, I think it's imperative that we continue to keep our K-12 and empower the K-12 folks. Greg talked about our great relationship with the BOC. I'll talk about our great relationship with the BOE. We absolutely appreciate it. And I'd love to be able to eventually introduce the topic this year, but knowing it won't pass, but I'd like to get birth year out of K-12. It makes absolutely no sense in 2020 when we have the ability to do micro assessments. We should not be treating our children as widgets. Every child is different. 5 years old might be the right time to bring one child in, 4 might be the other, and 7 might be the other. Graduating at 18 might be a good idea for most, but maybe it's 16 for others and 20 for others. I think it's important that we understand that each child is unique and we need to be able to accommodate that. And I think that by taking birth year out and then also integrating K-12 with higher ed and technical colleges, I think we've got a great opportunity to truly have a cradle, and I'm not going to say the grave, but a cradle to, I'll say, infinity type education opportunity for our children. So thanks a lot, everyone. We sure do appreciate the opportunity, and Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays.
It's often been said when you're hiring employees, you're looking for attitude and aptitude. And I want to say that when I watch this delegation right here, I realize that we have both in each one of these legislators, and I can't thank them enough for their time this morning, for their thoughtful responses to the questions. Certainly want to thank our sponsors on behalf of my company, AT&T, University of North Georgia, and then State Farm, the agency, Jan's agency there. And so thank them for their contribution to today's event. Also want to thank the Lanier Forsyth Rotary Club for partnering with the Forsyth County Chamber of Commerce for many years on this event. And is in their tradition, we'll close our meeting today with Rotary's 4-way test of the things we think, say, and do. Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? We hope you've enjoyed yourself this morning. This has been recorded and will be linked, I'm sure, to the Chamber website for anybody that would like to watch it or refer some of your friends to watch it later on. This event recorded and will be available via link to the Chamber website. Hope everybody has a wonderful holiday season. A Merry Christmas. Look forward to seeing you in 2021. Thank you.
Happy Hanukkah.
Happy Hanukkah. Thank you. Happy holidays, everybody. Thank you.